let's finish up this Artist Guide to Mudbox 2012 by talking a little bit about the integration between Mudbox and some of the other 3D applications that we'll be using in our pipelines. So let's open up Mudbox, and this is Lesson 17 Start. We just have a T-Rex version. This one happens to not have a pose on it. And so let's say that I want to start to use another application to change the topology. Now we looked at using transfer details and how that works. Let's look at the sort of entire workflow of that. So we're here in Mudbox and we're doing some sculpting, and we decide that we want to change our topology up, let's say. And so let me go ahead and dial the levels down on this guy. So we'll take him all the way down to level 0. Okay, and so what we can do is we could export this out as an OBJ, as an FBX, but there's a much faster solution here in Mudbox 2012. And then we go up to File. We can see those options here. We can see we have Send to Maya and a number of options, Send to 3ds Max, Send to Soft Image. Okay, so if you have these applications installed on your particular machine, then these will be active and you'll be able to create a nice connection between Mudbox and those Autodesk applications. So we'll use Send to Maya as an example, but you can also use Send to 3ds Max and Send to Soft. Okay, so under Send to Maya there are a number of options. We can send selected as a new scene. So what this means is we're going to send whatever we select here in Mudbox over to our application, in this case Maya, and it's going to open it as a new scene. We can also update current scene, so whatever scene that we have open in Maya, we can update it with the geometry that we have in Mudbox. So if something's changed, we can update that geometry. We can only update the textures in the current scene, or we can add to current scene. So if we have another piece that we want to add into our scene, we can add that in and it won't affect the other pieces. Okay, we can select previously sent objects, and we can also go into our preferences. In our preferences, you can see that we can choose how we deal with our paint layers. We can either not send any paint layers at all, we can flatten all of the layers in each channel before we send those, or we can send them all separately. Okay, we can, if there are sculpt layers, we can flatten the sculpt layers before sending, or export them as blend shapes. So for this instance, we'll go ahead and set that to not send the paint layers, because we just want to change some of the topology. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and select the body. Okay, if we don't select anything, it's going to ask us if we want to send everything in the scene, which may be fine. But in this case, I just want to send the body. So go to Send to Maya, Send Selected as New Scene. So we're starting from scratch. So we'll go ahead and send that as a new scene. Now here in Maya, it's actually asking us, do we want to save changes if we happen to have a scene open? We'll say, don't save. If you don't have Maya open, it'll go ahead and open that for you. Okay, and so now you can see we get a little indication here. This is connected to Mudbox and a little update button. And then over here in Mudbox, you can see we get the same indication connected to Maya. So it's a really integrated solution here. And so we can come in here, work on our mesh if we want to add some detail, some of the same things we did or we looked at with the transfer details. We can come in here, add some edge loops if we want to get some more resolution in here. If we want to come in and select an area around the eye, maybe add another edge loop in there by just extruding. We can do that. Okay, whatever changes we want to make to our topology. Now once we're ready to send this back, we have the same options here, and so this makes it really nice because we don't have to worry about different terminology. It's kind of the same wording and the same kind of paradigm that we're using with Mudbox and with Maya, so that really there's no confusion there. So if we come down to File, you can see we can go down Send to Soft, Send to Motion Builder, down to Send to Mudbox. And we have the same options: Send as New Scene, Update Current Scene, Add to Current Scene. Now we want to actually update our current scene because we want to update the existing dinosaur with the new topology. So we'll say Update Current Scene. Okay, and when it talks about, again, this current scene, we're talking about in the other application. So in this case, we're in Maya, so now we're talking about updating the scene in Mudbox. So go to Update, and now we're going to jump over back to Mudbox, and you can see it's really quick to just jump back and forth. Now it's going to invoke the transfer details because our topology has changed. If we had something where we've just moved pieces of the geometry around, we've moved points, we've used a deformer or something like that, we don't need to use the transfer details. So Mudbox is smart enough to know whether we need to actually update the topology or not. So for that reason, it's recommended that if you're going to take this out into something like Maya and do some changes to it, you can change the shape and you can update it. You can also change the topology and you can update it, but it's not recommended that you do both of those in the same action because Mudbox won't have a good way of figuring out where the points go. Okay, so in this case, we'll use our transfer details to get the details into the new topology. So we'll just say import, and this is familiar to us from the transfer details lesson. And so we'll let that go ahead and think for a minute. Okay, so now it has transferred everything over. So if we take a look at this, you can see this looks just like our original dinosaur. But now, as we know from our previous lesson, that new topology has been added in there, and if we wanted to go in and modify that, we could do that. Okay? So that is one reason for using this sort of integration. Another thing that we might want to do is to add detail to our scene. So I'm going to go ahead and take this. This is our T-Rex. Let's actually take this T-Rex topo, and I'm actually going to delete this for now, and the teeth. And let's turn on our T-Rex pose here. So this has one that's a little bit more posed up. Let's say I want to now add some geometry to this. So maybe I want to add a plane, kind of scale it up, and let me just turn on, I think it's on, but let me change the fall off radius here. It's a little bit too big, so I'll set that to something like 200-300. And now I just want to create maybe some simple terrain, a base for us to use. And so we could come in here and do this. Maybe we want to come in and select some faces to extrude out and then kind of smooth those down a little bit. Okay. And so we've got maybe a terrain base that we want to send over. We can select this object here in Maya, go to send to Mudbox, and we want to add it to the current scene. So we'll go ahead and just add that to current scene. And now come in here and through our camera, you can see that we've got some terrain added. So we can select that. We can come in with some of our tools and start to subdivide this. Okay, start to do a little bit of sculpting on it and start to build out a nice terrain for our little vignette of our dinosaur. Okay, and so if you have, you've got a scene going here in Mudbox and you realize, well, actually I need another piece of geometry. Okay, we can use the starting points, but we can't create custom geometry in Mudbox, but we can just as easily go into something like Maya, create a piece of geometry in Maya and just send it over to Mudbox and update our current scene with it. Okay, and that makes building up scenes really, really quick and easy. If you need something built, you can go ahead and just build it a real low resolution version of it here in Maya and just send it right over. Okay. Another reason that we might want to send geometry from one application to another would be maybe if we want to do a nice render of this. And so in this case, we can go ahead now and select, let's actually select our teeth and our T-Rex. So we'll select both of those. Okay, and let's go ahead and send to Maya. And we want to send as a new scene. Before I do that, I want to go into Preferences, and I want to flatten the paint layers in each channel before sending, because I do want to send the paint layers over. Okay, and looking at the layers, you can see we have on the body we have the diffuse, specular, and we also have a normal map that I've calculated. All right, so let's go ahead, and I'm actually going to go down a few. Let's maybe go right about here. And let's select those and send them over. So we'll go to File, Send to Maya, and let's send selected as new scene. Okay. The meshes aren't at level 0, so it's going to ask us, are you sure? Do you want to send the base mesh instead? So in those cases, you'll avoid having to send those really high-res meshes if you don't mean to. Otherwise, you can say, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to send the meshes at current level. I'll go ahead and select that. So we'll go ahead and send that over to Maya. Wait for that to export. Since we already have a scene open, it's going to ask us, do we want to actually save those changes or not? No, I don't want to save them. And now it's going to go ahead and read that file in. And now you can see we have a higher res version in here. So let's see if how much information we've brought over. So we'll go into smooth shade. You can see some of that detail there. We'll turn on hardware texturing. You can see that our texture map has come over. And we can turn on high quality rendering, or viewport 2.0. And we can see that our normal map has come over as well. Okay. And so just with a couple of clicks, we're able to get that geometry over from Mudbox. And now we can set up our lighting. However we want to set up our render here in Maya, we can make that happen. Okay. And that was just with a few clicks. We didn't have to export any files. We just sent it over. Okay. So Mudbox, the integration with Mudbox and Maya really has a lot of advantages. I know there are some other applications that have sort of integration between them and the general 3D applications, but there are several advantages to using Mudbox integration. It transfers a lot of scene data, so not just meshes and textures, but it also transforms, image planes, cameras, skeletons, layers, things like that, and it doesn't destroy any of your scene data. So you can merge those changes back into Maya and Max, and you don't have to lose any of your hierarchies, your scene layer assignments, any blind data that you may have. So it doesn't strip down your scene. So there are a lot of advantages to using that Mudbox integration, and it's a really nice also because just the terminology is the same. You've got the send to Mudbox here in Maya, and you've got send to Maya over in Mudbox, and all of the options are the same, so you know exactly what you're going to be getting when you send those files back and forth. So make sure to check that out. It's a big advantage of working with Mudbox is your ability to really integrate closely with the general 3D applications that you may already be using. Okay? So that is a look at the integration between Mudbox and our 3D applications, and that is actually brings our artist guide to Mudbox 2012 to a close. So I really thank you for watching this artist guide. We've covered kind of the basics of working in Mudbox. So hopefully, if you're completely new to the software, you have a good idea of how to get started. And we've also talked about some of the new features that are available in 2012 that will make our lives a little bit easier when working in Mudbox. Okay, so I just want to thank you again for watching. Thanks also to Autodesk for all of the help and feedback. We do appreciate it, and enjoy Mudbox.